Alrighty, thank you everybody. As I was saying just before, I'm used to teaching Year 9 RE on a Friday afternoon, last two lessons, it's cutting edge of Catholic education. So we're very proud to be here on Friday afternoon doing our Schoolbox presentation with you. My name's Luke Felstead. For a number of years I've been the Deputy Principal at St Andrews Catholic College. And
I'm Kate Maccoll. I'm the e-learning and innovation coordinator at St Andrews Catholic College. Okay, and we'd like to actually introduce you to our friend Andy. So he's the third presenter in our presentation here.
Very good. So Andy, St Andrews Innovative Learning Environment, built within the Schoolbox Context. It's taken a number of years to get to where we are, and I suppose that's what we want to share today because, and what we loved a lot about the culture within the Schoolbox community is that we learn from each other, and hopefully you've learned a lot today from other schools as they've presented. We wanted to give that back, and hopefully today we'll give you a little bit of advice, or maybe you'll see one slide or something that you'd like to take away, or even be in touch with us so that we can help you on your journey.
All right. So Andy is our environment. It's our virtual environment. It's a representation of our college, and so it is meant to be virtually a mirror of what we do in our college. Andy has personality, and we would ask you to keep an eye on the top right side of the slide, because you'll see Andy gets up to all sorts of things around the college, and so keep an eye on him. You'll see on Andy, and you'll see what Andy gets up to. Is it scrolling? Yep. Okay.
So, our notes, there you go, yep. So, I suppose the start of our journey, what was our context like? We are a school that is part of a system. We had a lot of staff who were a little bit gun shy of change. They were used to the sheep dip models at the start of the year, someone's idea that everybody got dunked into for 4 or 5 hours PD. And then that's the way it was going to be for the rest of the year, and everybody get on board, get involved, be a part of it. But there wasn't really any follow through with that. So that was how things were systematically pushed out within our context. So we knew that whatever we did within this environment, we needed to take that into consideration, because our staff, it would just be just another thing. And if they waited it out, hopefully it'll go away.
So we're a P to 12 college, we're co-educational, and we're situated in Cairns. And we're one of 29 schools. So that's the system connection that Luke was just alluding to there. We've done a long process of due diligence. It was nearly 3 years long. We've been signed into Schoolbox for just over a year. So when you are sitting there listening to us and thinking, well, where are you compared to us, that gives you some idea. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking to see some of our mentors in the room as well. So one of the things that we wanted to let you know is, while we started here, we've now come to a point that we're very proud of, where our staff are feeling like they trust us. They feel very happy in the way we've brought about our change, and they feel that they're being heard and their needs are being met. So that's really our best case scenario, because we've worked very, very hard to make sure that we're user focused. We're thinking of our students and our staff and our parents when they come on board. And we're also trying to build change resilience in our staff at the same time.
Yeah, I think we made a very conscious decision, and we'll go through this a little bit later on, but whenever we got up and spoke to staff, it was always about, we are here to serve the needs of the staff, the needs of the students, and the needs of the family. That is what we were all about. I think it was probably about the 5th or 6th staff meeting of saying the same thing over and over again, that we got a little bit of traction with that. Just to get a bit of an idea, I suppose, of the room, just want to get a feel of where people are in their journey. Can I just get a hands up if people are probably 6 months in? So I've got a few people, excellent, that's really nice to see. 12 months in with their staff, yep. 2 years?
And yep. Maybe what about people who aren't in yet but are looking at the system?
Beautiful.
Yeah, so we've got a little smattering of everybody.
We still know how you feel.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess one of our key messages to our staff is, this is not a sprint. This is not something that we're rushing into. This is something that's planned, and and that it's based on research, it's based on planning, and it's based on feedback. It's based on our user feedback. If they're not happy, and at first they're a little bit gun shy, weren't sure that we were serious about the user feedback bit, but they've realised that every time they come to us with feedback, we respond appropriately, we listen to what they have to say, and they're happy with the way that their feedback is taken on board, and if we make changes, they're happy that they've been part of that change process.
I think showing that it was going to be a long haul project that the whole leadership team was involved with and agreed on the premise of it, that was another starting point, that we really needed to be visibly leading as a leadership team.
So one of the things that brought this all about was because at the beginning of our journey, we actually catalogued an enormous list, and this is only 12 of them, of things that were challenges that we were facing and things that we felt we really needed to change, either for risk purposes or because we could just do them better for our people. So one of the things was we wanted to enhance that relationship with our families. Families are the first carers, the first educators, and we wanted to build that relationship. We felt they needed to be more involved.
Can I just say, we're a school of about 1,800 students, so we've probably got about 1,200 families, so prep to year 12. So cutting through and getting message through is really difficult within our context when you've got 3 different sectors in the school, you've got sports, music, all those different things going on. So we're looking for a way to get clear messages through.
We needed to look at our feedback. We're a visible learning school. We felt there was a way to improve our feedback, and that we were looking for that. We had an issue with disparate systems, and I'll talk about that shortly. Lots of different things going on. Nobody knew where to work. Nobody knew what was going on, and they didn't know where to go to for support. As a consequence of disparate systems, we had a lot of lost learning, and again, I'll go through that very shortly. Portal frustrations.
Portal frustrations. We lived in a system that dictated where parents, where staff went to go and get information. It wasn't something we could control, but it was certainly something that our community came to us about if it didn't work. You know, so the integrity of that system wasn't that good, so we wanted to create something that was much better for our families and for our students and our staff.
In terms of granularity, we wanted to be able to dig down quite deep into data and get information about what was going on in learning activities, and we didn't have any way to do that. We also found the white noise aspect that Luke's just alluded to, where you've got hundreds of messages going out a week, people just get overwhelmed and they actually stop listening. So we needed a way to target. We also had concerns about IP. I'm sorry,
you're all good. I mean, I think it's the lens that you look at it. Our staff are awesome staff. I love our staff. They were very keen. They were very innovative. But because nothing was happening in this space, they were stepping out and creating content in environments that we didn't know where it was. We didn't have control over it. So for us, just thinking about intellectual property, if a staff member up and left and they took their whole humanities subject content with them, what do we do? So that was a risk that we needed to address.
Absolutely. As a regional school, it means that our students are off-site quite often. If they need major treatment, they're in hospitals down in Brisbane. They're quite some distance from us. We have a lot of students that go off on holidays, just like you do. We have students that go on excursions, need to be able to access systems, and so we needed a way to look for off-site learning to make sure that that could still continue. If you think about a student that's going through cancer treatment, they're 1,800 kilometres from home, they're going through the most hell they've ever experienced, and they need a way to have normal. They need consistency. And one of the ways that we can look after our community is while they're having that experience, they can stay connected to us. And we felt we didn't have that.
Yep. I think we've spaces, as a lot of you would know, spaces for things like your sporting communities and your clubs, your music communities and clubs, all those other extracurricular activities that go on around the school, data analysis, which we've talked about a little bit, but also social learning challenges. Again, really well-meaning, good-hearted educators that are on social media streams at 10 o'clock at night because they're helping their Year 11, Year 12 chemistry students, but that puts them at risk. You know, so we wanted to be able to protect them as well.
So, just trying to get into 4 of these in a little bit more detail. So, Hattie's visible learning, 101 of learning of education is around feedback, and Hattie's Visible Learning puts a huge focus on feedback. Our current practices felt we weren't good at it, and so we found ourselves constrained within a system that was very protective, that wasn't allowing us to feed back as we needed to.
Yeah, as a deputy, I felt we'd slipped into private practice. We were mandated by the system to keep evidence of all the students learning for a minimum of 6 months. That meant that all their work went into a magical compactus in case one of, and 100 parents wants to come forward and look at it. That meant the other 99 kids never actually got to take their assessments home, show their parents and have a discussion about their learning. So quite often the first time that they would find out that their child was struggling was at an interim or an end of semester report, and that's just not good enough. And that private practice really needed to be opened up.
Very, very early on in our journey, we did risk analyses. And so we looked at a standard risk matrix. We looked at the sorts of behaviours that were going on, and we ranked them. So we looked at things like the student learning. What was the loss of student learning? It ranked on this top level as high. We looked at damage to brand when we had something going over on this website over here that we couldn't control, and something going on over there that we couldn't control. What was that risk to our college brand? We looked at social media and boundaries, and we looked at unauthorised data, and we looked at intellectual property. And when we looked at all of those things, they all ranked on the top level. Now, you've all done risk assessments, and you know that anything that appears up there, you actually have to act on. So we felt we needed to act on those things. And I guess the last one is, did you want to do that one?
Yeah, well, we didn't know. It wasn't until we actually sat down and Kate did a bit of an audit of all the different learning environments that kids are jumping in and out of in different classrooms, and did the math on the login time and, what's my login for this again and all that sort of stuff, that we realised that a huge portion of our student learning time was getting lost by people going in and out of different systems because different teachers were just finding different things to present their work on.
So if you looked at that, if you took only 5 minutes a lesson to do that, that meant that 12.5% of every student's lesson was lost as a result of having to log into different systems and try the cognitive load of having to work out what they had to do this time compared to what they had to do in Mr. Felstead's class was huge. When you looked at that over time, it meant that every student in our college, and there's 1,700 of them, was losing 5 weeks of learning. Each year in our college, 201 learning years were being lost. And I don't care who you are, how passionate you are about education, that's just not acceptable. So we saw that as a huge reason to create change.
Wriggle on now.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay,
Yes,
this is me.
shoot.
So the leadership team went through the Apple 8 elements of success process, and then they sat down through that process and mapped all our challenges, and we listed them, and then we sorted them into a needs analysis and gave them a rough priority. Our needs then drove what came next.
Right. Kate walked around, being e-learning coordinator, talked to all the staff, had a look at what was actually in place in the classroom. Some people using Canvas, some people, having a chat with them, comparing it against, as a leadership team, what we were looking for. And we found that there was actually nothing being used at that point in time that fulfilled all our needs.
So then we did a literature review, and this was fascinating because we didn't know what we didn't know until we started reading. And then suddenly, after reading, there was 3 of us reading, we read about 90 papers, nothing was older than 4 years, and we started to see that there were different types of architectures that you could use. There were definite trends going on and current research, and so we were able to identify the outdated language that people would use, and so we came across some possible futures, and we took those possible futures and possible things that learning systems were doing to our leadership team.
Yeah, so it wasn't an LMS, it was a digital, next generation digital learning environment. So yeah, we went and we learnt with it, okay, we probably haven't had the depth of conversation with leadership that we needed to have. So we went back and educated the leadership team about what are all the things that technology can bring into our teaching and learning and wellbeing environment. So once we brought all this new capabilities back, we did a little bit of a hierarchy of what's most important through to what's least important if we're going to start funneling down and looking at a product.
And you notice at this point we really haven't talked about products, but what we did when we did our needs analysis and priorities is that we said, right, these are the things that we want, these are desirable, these are things that are important, these probably not so much, but we do have deal breakers. So our deal breakers were that it couldn't make things harder for our teachers, it had to be technically automated, and I'm really hoping that happens soon because we're up to about 170 data sets at this point, which is just because we just can't get the data right, which is not anything about Schoolbox. They've been magical with us. It had to be easy to use because we had a range of staff with a range of abilities, and there needed to be overall more benefit than pain. So they were our deal breakers.
Naturally, and I don't know whether you've done this same journey, quite a few people probably have, you kind of end up with 3 or 4 major players in this space that there's a fair bit of literature on that you get a bit interested in, but that's all in theory and all on paper. So we then identified who did we want to chase down a little bit further and start having conversations with.
So we narrowed it to 2.
3 became 2.
And then we went out and talked to best practice schools. So the best practice schools that we visited were 3 in Brisbane and 3 in Sydney, and they were amazing. When we went in there, we went in with a list of preset questions. We sat in the first school and realised that we thought we knew and we had no idea. It was amazing. I
can remember when Michael Jackson died, I can remember when the Twin Towers were hit, and I can remember when I first saw a school that was in this environment really well, and I sat back in the car and went,
oh.
I thought we were good, but nah, we're not even close.
So this was huge, and this was incredibly valuable because it allowed us to go out. We talked to people about their change management process, what worked, what didn't work, what would you change, what were you disappointed with, what surprised you. We did that with every one of those schools, and they were all open and honest and transparent, and we took those lessons and we developed what's working for us. One of the things that we did have, though, we had a number of light bulb moments, but this was one of the things that we would go back and change. We went as a deputy, an e-learning coordinator and a principal, and we did not take our IT manager and we did not take our marketing and communications officer, and we should have, because they actually would have brought a richness and depth to our communication, our process that we didn't have.
Absolutely. Again, we were just always conscious of not being directed by a product or what other schools had done. We needed to keep coming back to what was our lighthouse, what was our purpose. Kate came up with the Parrot of Purpose conversation about really defining and being guided by a bit of a vision.
The Parrot of Purpose sits on your shoulder and he says, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? How is this related to your purpose? Why are you doing this? How is this related to your purpose? So it sits there and it constantly questions. So we then wrote our purpose. It's wordy, but it suits. This is our yardstick. Whenever somebody comes to us and they say to us, what do we want to do this? Can we do this? We measure it against our purpose. If that works, then we will go ahead and start planning that process.
And that just fits our context. It fits our needs.
Okay, organisational alignment. Now, this is something that's really important. For us, it was critical, and we think this is a key piece that allows us to work through this. So we would say, you will hear a lot about strategy. Strategize, create strategic plans, and so on. But it's only one of the things that you need to consider. Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what that actually means is you can strategize as much as you like, but if you aren't aware of what your culture says, what your culture does, what your culture believes, how they will behave, then they can undo all your good strategy. So you need to understand your culture so that you can then make sure that your strategic plan aligns with it. When they work hand in hand, you're going to have far more success. So we spent a lot of time making sure we were respecting our people and respecting our culture and aligning our strategic plan to that.
We needed to be leaders. We needed to have a vision. We needed to calm the farm by showing that this was well thought through and well considered, and strategies were in place. But we weren't doing that in isolation. We needed to also bring our community in under the tent with us and share in the journey with us on this.
Now, one of the key models that we
excellent.
used, we could have used any number of models for change, but we decided to use Noster's model for managing complex change, which we think is fabulous. Essentially, it says if you have vision, if you have skills, if you have resources, incentives and an action plan, you will get success. And that's great. But what happens if you miss them? And I know that you're taking photos, but the next slide's better. Okay. So the next slide.
Keep going all the way down, I reckon.
All the way around.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you miss out on some of these things, if you miss out on vision, then people are confused. They don't know why we're doing it. If you miss out on skills, then they're anxious. I know I have to do this. I know why I have to do this, but I can't because I don't know how. If you miss incentives, then people resist. Why should I? I don't have to. What I'm doing works. What's in it for me?
I don't have to.
If you miss out on resources, then they get frustrated because they can see the vision, they could see what would change, but they can't help it. And then if you miss an action plan, then you just walk on the same space, you get nowhere.
And we've all done this, we've all seen this. And when I first saw this model, I went, yeah, that makes sense how that ended up that way, you know? It makes sense. It's a great model. One of our key discernments was, though, that this is not going to be the Luke and Kate show. This is not our vision. This is not leadership coming in and making an awesome resume, you know, on implementing something. This is something that if it's going to meet the needs of the staff and the students, the staff and the students are going to be heavily involved and it's going to be theirs. So we wanted to place the leadership for this back into what we do with staff and students.
Absolutely. So while leadership is about leading from within, leading others and leading by example, we focused on all of those, but because we're user focused, we did have a stronger emphasis on leading from within. Too fast.
So we come up with a bit of a change management model. Got to go back one, Kate.
Oh, back
You're
one.
on that. Yeah, you're on that one, not this one. Yep. No, or is that one? Okay, you go.
Thought that's where I was.
No, it's all right.
Okay, all right. So with this one, this was part of what our culture. We were constantly listening to our staff and our students and our parents. We are conscious that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So that means we need to listen twice as much as we talk so that we can make sure that we're putting back the message that they're giving us. We needed to be aware of their concerns. That meant we had to go out and talk to people. We needed to plant ideas and fertilise them over time so they could so they could bloom and grow.
Good example. You know that person in the staff room who's pretty loud and a little bit antagonistic sometimes, complaining about reports? I said, you know, I saw at the Schoolbox conference the other week that you can do continuous reporting and you won't have to do this. You know, just dropping those seeds that there's a better horizon out there to work towards.
We needed to search for remedies for the ailments, and we did. We put a lot of time into that, and it was very challenging at times. There were some really difficult times where I would have been quite happy to walk away, but because our leadership was so committed to the vision, we didn't. We stuck to that commitment to what we're trying to achieve and the benefit that our community is going to get.
So, how are we going to get this moving?
I don't know who's got a timer.
We needed the leadership team to be strategic. We needed the whole leadership team to be on board and understand what is that 3 to 5 year vision, what it's going to look like, how are we going to stage out the capabilities that are inside Schoolbox. How are we going to stage that out? Because you can't go to continuous reporting within the first couple of months. So we sat there and we strategised that. The project team is, because they're not necessarily in the leadership team, but who are the people that have the horsepower to make things happen? You know, it's people like your heads of department, if you've got your assistant principal administration or whoever, you know, gives people time release, you need those key people to make those things happen. And at the end, champions, which is something we learnt within the Schoolbox community, visiting best practice schools, is getting those early adopters who are already jumped out in all those different environments we talked about and sell the vision to them because they jumped on board, and get them to be the ones that are in there and creating and learning and having those conversations in the staff room and showing other people the wonderful things that can be done.
It's important to remember that this is a feed forward
Yep.
process. So what happened might be an example of a process for us might have been, we decided that we were going to start with the portal process. So this was going to be where we were going to have some news items and the calendar dates. And so people the lead decision picked a date for that. That then went to the strategic team, the project team, who then said, okay, to do that, we need these things to happen. And then they made sure they happened. Our champions tested it and said, that doesn't work, that does. And we rolled it out after all that. So with the feedback and things in mind.
Beautiful. Champions, and they're not just teaching staff, they're administration staff, they're leadership staff. So we try to get a representation across the entire college. It seems like a lot of people, and it is, bless their cotton socks, they're all very, very good people. But we had an entire school staff of over 250 people. This had the multiplying effect. You know, if we could get this many people on board and we could sell them the vision, the early adopters, and we did, and they did a great job, then that multiplied our effect within the staff room. We could point to those people for the more reluctant staff to sit with and get help and work with, instead of just Kate and myself.
So we talked about strategy, and we gently staged it. The answer there's a question that says, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So take little chunks. We've heard that all the way along. For us, we put out some detail, not a lot, about the sorts of things that we were looking at. We have two strands in our strategy. The first is our teaching and learning strand, and the second is our communication strand. In the white boxes is who the expected audiences are going to be. And so we've said that these are our major stepping stones that we want to move through.
Yep. They're a little bit rubbery because the feedback loop might come back and say, no, we can't do that yet, or teachers aren't ready to do that yet. So we'll make that a little bit rubbery, listening to the voice of who we're working with. But we were putting in those little minimum standards. By this key point in time, we want to see an assessment up, we want to see this up, we want to see that up.
So every phase comes with non-negotiables, and so this is our latest set of non-negotiables that said for teachers, we're moving from we'd like you to do this to we expect that by the start of term 1, you will have done these things in the teaching and learning, and you will be doing those things in communication.
Some of those things were 6 months in advance. So even your most reluctant teacher knew they had 6 months to get on board.
For our community, that worked.
Yep.
Your community may well be faster on the ball than ours.
Yeah. We're a big ship, it's like turning the Titanic. And then we needed to be authentic, and when we had those challenging conversations with staff, it's easy to bounce that back and say, hang on, these are the conversations we have with the children in our classroom. We understand that learning is difficult. We understand that you've got to get in the pit and it's going to be hard, but you've got to have faith that when we come out, we're going to be in a better position. So we're kind of challenging those teachers to walk the talk and be authentic with the visible learning.
All right. So one of the lessons that we learnt by visiting other schools was branding is important, and it was also important given that we'd realised that our students were losing so much lesson time. Because if you have a consistent template across pages, then what you end up with is students don't need to think about where the file section is. They know it's always on this place on the page, no matter where they go. So we looked at brand, and we needed something that was going to be consistent with our we're in far north Queensland. We're a little bit Kaz, you know, we're a bit funky, but you know what? We're professional about what we do. So we actually looked at the first draft which indicated that I had no skills in graphic design or anything like that. And we went to people, we outsourced to people who, for a very, very reasonable price, managed to give us some really good effects that we believe actually represents our college, which is part of the...
Yeah, I think as a school, quite often we spend too much time looking in at our teaching and learning what goes in the classroom, and we can easily miss what we look like from the outside, and that is of huge importance for our parents. So our websites, those sorts of things, when people are looking in, this is when parents are going to be coming in and looking at what's going on in people's classrooms. It needed to be tight, it needed to be professional, it needed to show us as a pretty good school.
Have you noticed all the different Andys? Have you seen him being very busy? So Andy was part of our engagement strategy. It worked very well because it allowed us to engage with a staff who wouldn't be engaging. So we would go to a department, say the dance department, I'm just picking a department, that's not necessarily the problem. We would go to a department and we would say, what do you think Andy needs to do in your department? So Andy can actually hip hop dance. I just haven't chosen to put him up here as well. And suddenly our teachers were starting to say, oh, Andy. And then it became part of our language. Ask Andy. It's in Andy. Go to Andy. I'm sure we can get that from Andy.
You know when your music department's happy, you're doing well. Budget. Sorry, music teachers. Love you. Budget. I think I'll probably pay a similar amount of money for math space as I do for Schoolbox, you know. It's not a budget thing necessarily. What was our learning in this was the HR, the resourcing that you put around it. When we went around to best practice schools, it was the schools that actually set aside the finances or the manpower or womanpower around the product to make it work. That's what you need to do. It's not the product, it's not magical, it's the people you get on it. You know, and we would always love more, and I think every school I've heard talk would love more people working on it, but to have a couple of people, you know, fairly dedicated and owning it and working on it is a must.
And one of our key things is if you value it, give it a dollar value.
Yep.
Or give it time. So we did that.
Same as a timetable. If it's not in the timetable, it doesn't get taught, you know, so you've got to do those things properly.
I promise we're finishing.
Yep.
Okay, so there were some tough conversations, as I alluded to before. They were very, very tough, and you, I'm sure, are having similar tough conversations because I guess that's why you're here. So our advice to you are these things. You are going to have them. Remember that. Remember your vision. Remember what you're trying to achieve. Role play and practice those tough conversations so that you've got the answers when they come. You know your people. If you know your culture, you know who will be the people that will give you the tough conversations. Know what your answers are. Practice them. Communicate your needs clearly. I understand, Luke, that you're feeling really uncomfortable about this, but you know, a lot of the growth is outside your comfort zone or whatever works for your people. Remember, it's about relationships and that bond between structure, strategy and culture, and get your community on side. For us, it's really nice when we have conversations to say, you know, St Andrews is a community of 5,000 people. Our parents want this, our students want this, our teachers want this. So it's comforting to have that number backing you.
And this is the last slide, but part of that too is, we're not talking about the lead team and the leadership team making visions and decisions. We've actually got 2 parents on that and 2 students on that are actually sitting there with the principal making the decisions about the future of what we're rolling out. And that's invaluable. I think Kieran, one of our kids who's gone over to MIT and done all this sort of stuff, he wrote about 3 or 4 pages of things, of things that we could do differently and improve for the learning of children within about 2 days. Thanks, Kieran.
And so finally, you've seen this. We want to go from there to there. We want it to be a straight line, but it's really messy.
We even think the messy one's actually straighter than what it was.
We think it's probably straighter than what we experienced.
And that's okay.
So we've just sped through this, and we thank you for your time for letting us go. But thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you.